Welcome to Viggen tutorial number 3. Here we're going to talk about flying. So, the first thing you need to know is that if you look at the radar here, there's a circle around it, and that circle is a heading indicator. That's the main heading indicator actually. Of course there's also a heading indicator up here in the HUD that shows decadecimals. And a very handy key for when you zoom around and look inside the cockpit is Shift Q, like this. It will reset the view and back to looking out the front window. So a thing to notice here is that we have something called an EPR gauge, which is the engine pressure ratio, and it is useful because you can sort of estimate the thrust, the mil thrust that you are producing when you look at that gauge here. So 2 is around the rated mil thrust for the plane. So another nice and handy thing is that if you go into menu and options, menu and systems monitor, you can get some information about under the hood what's going on. If you're interested in that, there's many interesting things, and there's a performance monitor for aerodynamic stuff. So over here on the right side we have the accelerometer. You can see it's 1G now, and actually when you pull a lot of G's, it's gonna, I'll just show it, it's gonna come up with a warning on the, like that, airframe structural positive G load exceeded, and that warning is dynamic. It depends on the weight of the aircraft, how many G's you are allowed to pull, and if your landing gear is down and stuff like that. And you can see here in the systems monitor, you can see max allowed and mean allowed G forces. Right now is 6.5 Gs. It's never gonna go above 7 Gs, so the flight controls allows you to pull around 8 Gs or more in some situations, but the pilot were only allowed to pull 7 Gs actually under normal circumstances. So one thing to notice here is that once you come into the transonic regime, you will see that here on the left side, just below the HUD, there's a little white light going on here. That means you're inside the transonic regime. Oh, now we are outside it again. And I just did Shift Q again. Remember that key, it's very handy. And so another thing to notice is that if I fly against the terrain and look at the HUD, there will be an arrow indicating if I'm going to collide with the terrain, and like that. And the direction the arrow is pointing in is the direction I should take for the fastest route to get out of terrain collision impact. Okay, so so trim, there's 2 trim indicators here. There's the pitch trim and there's the roll trim. The roll trim is just a green light when the roll trim is trimmed to neutral, and the pitch trim will show up and down. And if you look here, you will see there's some buttons for trim free switches, and there's a flip lid switch here where you can reset the trim if you want to. So just for information, the plane has some aerobatic smoke, yellow and blue, and off, of course. So The HUD. I think I have covered the altitude scale and the heading scale. There is something called digital elevation here. There's this number here, and it shows the elevation in of the terrain below me. So that comes from a database inside the plane's computer that in the real life they had the whole of Sweden and probably some surrounding areas. So you can see the elevation of the terrain below you. If if there's a little R in front of this, that means that the radar altimeter, you are below a certain altitude, and then the radar altimeter takes on, and then it's not elevation it will show, then it will show height above terrain when there's an R for Romeo in front. And of course right now I think it's in meters. Let's switch to interoperability mode there. So we of course have our airspeed. If it says KT in front, it is knots. Mach is below it, and if you Mach only shows when you are above 0.5 Mach. And if you are not running in interoperability mode, it will only show one of them. Meaning that right now it will only show Mach number and no knots number. If it says GS in front of instead of KT, it means it's ground speed, and that's only used in tactical mode. So altitude lines. So right now it's gonna show some altitude lines, and that's because I coded in a waypoint that has a certain altitude, and you'll see some vertical lines there in the HUD. I'll just zoom in on them there, next to the -5 pitch line there. And what you want to do is with those altitude lines is you want to notice the top of them, and the top is what you want to align. So if the top is aligned with the horizon line, then you are at the altitude that the horizon line is pointing you to. So it's sort of your desired altitude, or an altitude buck sort of. And it's used also in the autopilot. When you take off, they always sit at 500 meters above you, and that is like 1640 feet. And yeah, it's mostly used with autopilot actually, because you rarely type in waypoints, I think, with altitudes. So heading buck, of course, you see it blinking up here, those three vertical lines up here. And when you have autopilot engaged, it will show the autopilot heading buck. So the plane also shows something else in the HUD, and that is, you can see there's an ENDI now there where it says 25, and that is actually an airport tower. It will show the nearest tower, so not the nearest tower in front of you, but just the nearest tower around the aircraft, and there's 21 miles to that tower. And ENDI is of course the ICAO code. And notice here that if you want to have a specific air tower displayed, you just go into location in menu and tower position, and then you choose your ICAO there, and then that's the ICAO it's gonna show you on the HUD. Right now it's set to always use nearest tower. Okay. So you can set the line thickness in options. Let's see. HUD line width here, thinner, default, thicker. So you can make, if you have hard problems to see the HUD, you can make the lines real fat and like that. And then there's something called the side slip indicator, which will show you the side slip, it can be useful in, it's down there in the right corner, it will show you this the side slip angle, so it can be useful in turning and stuff like that. It's actually not an authentic feature, so I won't talk much about that. Then we have the radar, and as you can see now we have a radar echo. That's the round dot there, and you see the white line that now spins around in the radar. That's your horizon you have there, artificial horizon. And you will see the altitude lines from the HUD is also on that horizon line. The 15 in the corner is what it's set to, and we can set it to a longer range. It's in kilometers, but if you hover the mouse over it, you can see it's 16.2 nautical miles now for 30 kilometers. So about seeing one of those echoes. The echoes will also show up in the HUD. So I'm just gonna see here. I have now an echo that's half moon displayed there, or half circle is an echo, and if I press Shift N for November, it will select that, because that selects the centermost echo in the HUD, and it's a Scandinavian 2864. And if I press I, like India, it will show the type, or it doesn't do that now, but that's probably because it's not a multiplayer plane, it's an AI plane. Okay. So it also has a tail. If you'll notice, there's a little line going out from the half circle there, and that's its velocity vector, and it's flying away from me now to about my 2 o'clock. It should not be viewed as an arrow, it should be viewed as a tail. So if I press November N on keyboard, I will choose the next one that's in the radar cone, and there I can cycle through them if I don't want to press Shift N and just get the one that is centermost in the HUD. So the plane's radar is set up with Doppler, actually something taken from the Mirage, and that will actually no, I'm gonna talk about that in the tactical tutorial. Never mind. You can get it in options. You can enable terrain masking. MP planes can hide for radar behind terrain, and that only goes for multiplayer planes, and then it will not show them if they're behind a mountain or something, so the radar can't look through the mountain. It's for performance reasons. It's not enabled all the time, and not for AI planes. So we have the radio here, and here on this knob you can adjust the frequency, minor and major, and com or nav, and megahertz or kilohertz for ADF, and you can adjust the volume and radial. So there's another radio interface or panel. It is here. That is the channel selector, and you can see it displays here at the bottom. It displays the frequency, and I will demonstrate how to put in another frequency. I press clear. That's this button here, and then I enter a frequency. It's 5 digits, and when the 5 digits are entered, it's active if the megahertz button is checked. So above it is the number buttons. That means, hold on. Oh, that's there it is. I thought I was crashing. Okay. That's the channel numbers, and you can just enter a channel in the same manner, some random channel here, and then you get some megahertz out of that. The FM AM switch is not used for anything, and the base here is not used for anything yet anyway. So About the radio, when you are tuned into a bore or tuned into an ADF, you will see the needles here in the attitude indicator showing you the steering commands to intercept with those, and you will also see in the HUD, if autopilot is not on, you will see the heading bug help you with that. There's also here on the radar, there's a heading bug. That is the yellow thing there. That's a heading bug. When you tune into ILS, it will also show here in the attitude indicator, and it will also show in the HUD, unless well, I'll get more into that into landing in the landing tutorial actually. Then we have DME. I can just switch on DME here. Digital measuring equipment. So it will show the attitude, the distance scale here again, but it looks different from when we took off. It will show the distance to the waypoint I have entered. It will show the distance to the DME entered. And it now shows 25.2 nautical miles, and the diamond on top will start to move when it's less than 20, and then it will go down to 0, which is when you are of course on top of it. So distance scales, DME has priority on the distance scale, but if I switch off distance scale again, DME again, you see I still have the distance scale, but now it shows a different distance. Now it shows the distance to the waypoint I have entered. So that's the distance scale is also used for that. But DME has priority, so if you have DME enabled and it's tuned in, then that has priority and will show in over waypoints. So one more thing about DME is that there's also a DME KURS here, a gauge indicator, and it will show the kilometers to the DME. And 40 kilometers is the max. One important thing to notice about radio navigation is that there is some keys in the aircraft help for different stuff in the aircraft. But for radio navigation there's actually a bunch of more keys, and if you scroll down you will see some different ones here. I didn't want to add them to the top here because then there's just too many. But yeah, that should help also. Then there's a little nifty feature called tills, where you can press Y Yankee on the keyboard and it will tune into ILS frequencies, and you can see here what is on nearby tower, and it tuned into ENPR runway 35. And Yankee again to toggle it off. So the plane is equipped with something called buffeting. You will, if you, for example, let me see if I can demonstrate. No, I'm flying too fast. So it will make the plane shake a little bit. Now I go down to the transonic regime. And the plane will start to shake a little bit. The reason you don't see it right now is because I'm high up in the atmosphere and it doesn't shake so much when you get high up. So it was a bad demonstration, sorry about that. But it will shake also when you're on the runway above a certain speed, and it will shake at higher angle of attacks. It will shake in the transonic regime, it will shake at G-forces, it will shake when you get hit or when the plane explodes. The plane is equipped with stress and damage system, so if you pull a lot of G's it can actually rip off the the wings if you're unlucky. And same if you hit the ground, even though it's a GSP sim plane, it will explode or take damage in some way. And that also goes when you're not flying. If you're taxiing and you hit some building with too high speed, then it might take some damage. So there's something called the tertiary gate here. I will just demonstrate it. It is here. You can see, if you notice the engine here, it is there's a opening there for the reverse thrust. It will of course close when you get above a certain speed. To reduce drag. So if your engine should cut out in the middle of the flight or something, oh, that closes, you see. If the engine should cut out in the middle of the flight, doing auto start will actually do a battery start. You can also do it manually, of course, following the checklist or something. And if the battery is low on power, it will actually attempt to do an ram air turbine start, but you need some speed already to be able to do that. So if you fly too fast or the engine gets heated up too much, that it can start an engine fire, and engine fires can actually spread to other systems in the aircraft, and it can also go out by itself if you're lucky. And you will also be able to get it if you're on the runway and you do thrust reversing at a high thrust when you are very slow. If you remember, I talked about the white light there in the first tutorial about that, or the second. So you can of course also get engine fire by getting hit. I'll talk about that in the tactical tutorial. So inverted flying affects oil pressure so that it has it's really only safe to fly inverted for 10 seconds. If you fly more than 10 seconds, then you might get problems with oil pressure and engine. So also how you fly affects how the fuel tanks empty. So if you do a lot of maneuvering and stuff, they might not empty in an evenly way, so that they are not able to, because there's more pump systems, and the engine requires a certain amount of fuel, of course, at certain thrust levels. So if the engine starts to cut out and then start running again, and then cut out and running again, it's simply because it's starved because of the way you have flown properly. So just throttle down and reduce the consumption of the engine. You will probably have very little fuel left at that point anyway, so you probably don't want to use afterburners or something like that. So the afterburners can actually empty all the internal fuel in less than 10 minutes, so be careful about using afterburner too much. Okay, now I have gotten up into altitude, and as you can see, there's cold up here, so there's some frost on the glass, and the temperature is simulated also using the air conditioner I have mentioned before. And you can also you see there's now both fog and frost on the glass. You can increase the hot air on windshield here, and that should make it clear at least some of the fog on the windshield. You see now it clears this area and this area here and this area here. So the hot air on windshield won't help to clear the frost. It's determined by the temperature of the glass and the temperature in the cockpit and outside. So there's also the thing here that if you fly very fast, the ram rise temperature will also help to defrost the glass. But I can also just crank up the air conditioning, not too much, and that should help a bit with it also. It might take a while though, it doesn't go so fast. So another thing is, I should mention that the pressure of the cockpit You can see here, that's not the pressure of the cockpit, that's the pressure difference between the cockpit and outside, if you need that. It's in kilopond per meter squared. Just, you can also see cabin pressure here on the systems monitor, I think, yes, PSI. Okay, so you can also, if you open the canopy at too high speeds, it will break off, and that will of course produce unnecessary drag and be irritating. And there's also a switch here for if you need to change canopy, where it will actually the canopy will go off. So another thing is that if you look at the mirrors here, they show some clouds moving and stuff like that. I just want to say, don't be too fooled by them. It's only an graphical effect. They don't actually work. Just sort of pretend to work. So I think that's it for this tutorial. The next tutorial will be about the autopilot. Thank you.